We're live.
We're live. Okay, this is the Senate Education Committee on February 13th, 1:30. We're meeting today on a little bit of an ad hoc basis since our field trip got canceled due to school closings. We have another one we're working on for next week, but that'll be closer. So I thought we might as well use a little time. We don't need to, maybe we'll do some, maybe it'll be quick, maybe we'll, depending on what kind of level of conversation we get into, but we were trying yesterday, we were, really beginning to set the stage for us to have a real discussion about district size. We're not going to decide it because I think maybe it's just like, what are we thinking? And then we begin to test some of what we might be thinking. And then we have to think about what other testimony, once we begin to think maybe we'll go in this direction, maybe what kind of testimony do we want into check and make sure that we have in front of us in a way, district size, school size, class size. We organized it yesterday around district size. I guess it's kind of like, what are people thinking? We had from the secretary all the factors that they believed we should consider as we think about district size. We had testimony that 84, is that what it was, from superintendents?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I just thought we might as well use this time to have a discussion. It's kind of just touching base. We're obviously a long way from. So just what are people thinking?
I think regarding district size, I feel like that's where probably end up spending the most time trying to address where we want to land. Mainly because I think school size and class size is something that probably want to leave more so or defer more so to the folks running the schools and the teachers running the classrooms as to what class size actually works. And specifically for the district size, I'd like to learn more specifically about the research behind why the proposal of 2,000 to 4,000 sounds good as compared to the 10,000 that was also proposed. I'm not saying I'm opposed or in support of one or the other. I think it's just my own lack of understanding of the specific details, the research behind why some of these numbers are good, depending on what your perspective is. That's my initial thought.
Whichever way people want to go.
Sure, yeah. Well, so I would say that the biggest takeaway for me, and I think Bill Kimball mentioned this, is that people will not do this for themselves. When we did Act 46 and thought people will figure out their dance partners and will set some parameters, that often is a recipe for the lower wealth communities to get left behind or have a harder time finding a dance partner. So I would say that my big principle overall is that the effort to try and equalize brand list value by ADM is a noble pursuit that we can't, if we can make it more of a reality to have wealth equalized districts rather than have what we have now, which is extremely poor and pretty wealthy districts, 11 to 1 versus something like 2 or 3 to 1. That is a principle that I'm taking into this redistricting process. And from there, I feel like whatever I say, someone's going to email and yell at me, but I'm somewhere in the 7 to 18 district range. I think 5 is really easy for us to say in Montpelier. And then the reality of what that looks like on the ground, even if that's what we say, we need to recognize that would take 4 to 6 years. That if you can't say in 2 years, you should all be organized into 5 districts with this line drawn around them. So I think the question is, do we want to take a big step in 2 years that really gets people thinking about both quality of education and economies of scale? Or do we want, we really need to be realistic about this attitude of like what works well from like a policy and governance perspective at a very macro level to what the experience will be on the ground. That's my biggest takeaway from Act 46. You can't just wave a magic wand at these folks. They are doing the work and they know what this will take. So wherever we start to land, we just need to build an incredibly realistic and supportive timeline as well for, superintendents and all the stakeholders, to parents, especially with their transportation boundaries, like to be brought into this conversation about what's actually realistic. I will say for my piece, where we started with this map and how who's close enough to meet as superintendents obviously created this huge district in the Chittenden Franklin area, and Addison. That's a lot, why that would be 30 something thousand and the rest would be 10 to 15,000. There's a lot of ways that starts to break down in terms of there are times when it's fair or unfair to give them an equal share or to give them more, because they might have less physical plant that's a lot older, but they also have a ton more students who need programs. And, so it just feels like not the right direction to make one of the districts automatically outsized or kind of an outlier in the process. And I could just see different catchment areas where kids already go to school based on where they are in the islands or Southern Chittenden County or Addison County. I wouldn't even begin to know how we put that in one district.
You just want straight feedback.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you wanted to touch on either of these comments.
No, I think let people go around the room first and we'll have this and we can delve in a little more.
Okay, I have 3 concerns. So regarding district size, we've seen different opinions now. We're not the subject matter experts. We're not the subject matter experts on school size or class size. We have being married to an education PhD. I know that there are folks who study these things. There's 1,000 PhDs out there who have deep dive into these topics that could probably, and I don't know who to ask. That's the problem. I don't know who to trust or who to ask. And we definitely need to sift through the variety of opinions to try to find some science or at least some common ground between the topics, that topic. The second is what Senator Hinsdale mentioned, which is district size. I think that there needs to be a parity in district size as close as possible. Otherwise, it becomes a political issue. One's more dominant than the other. One leads the remainder. So I do think that we ought to at least put some time into trying to find a parity, which we just, I think, have to find out, okay, where are the natural lines and how not to alienate communities. The third thing is that school board size has percolated as an issue. If there's only 5 or there's only 7 or whatever the right number is, it's going to become a very political scenario. Some of them may be appointed based on position. Some of them will be elected. It's the elected ones that I'm concerned about, because that becomes a real political race. And it's going to get funded by, there's going to be special interests highly engaged in the process, which then loses the voice of the community. And that's one of my fundamental challenges is how do we properly represent the communities, and keep it out of the political realm and keep it out of the special interest realm and keep it in that they represent the communities in which they come. Those are the three primary ones that I've kind of noodled over the past couple of weeks.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think that, you know, I heard Tom Chipman
But
say,
by the way, it's okay not to know.
okay,
Yes, we're just.
but I think we're missing a point here. That as we develop a plan, there's a process. And that as we start brainstorming where we're gonna go with this process, you're gonna find that you're gonna require data. You're gonna list the facts and you're gonna list the assumptions. And as we work through the process, we're gonna ask for data that's gonna give us the answer. It's gonna be, you know, geography has a lot to do with it. You know, I think we need not allow any of the political biases get involved in the process once we start. But we also need to get input from the experts that know what is gonna work. If it's absolutely not gonna work, we need to consider not consider that. So, and I really want to get started on this process of developing a plan.
Senator Heflin.
So my biggest thing, what we've heard from like superintendents, principals, teachers, how we can cut down on bureaucracy. So these people can do their jobs while they're at work, especially the teachers. That's a big concern. I don't know if that's something we can address why we're doing this. I know, as far as like school choice in that's getting a lot of misconception. Their facts said that 85%, again, I can't remember who told us this, but I do remember 85% of the students stay in their surrounding area. They don't choose to, they go to whatever school is closest just because of convenience. I think 40 plus other states use the foundation formula. So I think that is the right avenue to go. I know we fund our funding. I think we should look at different ways of funding other than just our property tax. That's more equal. And then, speaking on, the secretary was saying yesterday that, the base funding that they were working off, that whatever consulting company they were going to use said that was more than enough, that was a good number to say, here's what we can do with the kids' money. So my concerns are just those. And as we go, I hope we iron them out. I continue to tell everybody I like the cooperation between both sides, that we want to get this right. And it's for Vermonters, not for one party or the other, but for our kids. So.
Certainly agree with that.
Can I add, or did you want to? I think a couple other things I wanted to also consider. I've gotten a lot of questions from constituents also about, why aren't we looking at an income tax, going from property tax to income tax? And, I don't have the language or frankly, the knowledge in my brain as to how to answer that. And getting some more clarity there as to why. Some more clarity as to why I think would be helpful. And, another piece, I know we're so confined with our time, but the other thing I also want to consider in whatever way we can is, not just the outlook for, 2026 and 27, but, 5-10 years from now, because I think, this is just my opinion, I think the demographics of Vermont are going to change. I think we're going to have more population. I think that with the changes that we've made to housing and continuing to make, I think, fingers crossed, over time, more housing will become available. And, I would hate to see schools potentially closing or being retrofitted for something different. And then over 10 years, the community grows and everybody's saying, why don't we have a school here? We had one here 15 years ago. So I don't know how we can address that, but it's something that I have in the back of my mind, just a long-term outlook.
That's why I brought up the point yesterday about when, the money we're gonna be saving by going to the foundation formula. Hopefully somebody's storing some of that away, because when the demographics do change, we don't wanna be able to say, we can't build new school because we have a moratorium on construction. So if we're building, we're taking some revenue and putting it in a rainy day fund for building schools, and we have a community, maybe Chittenden County doesn't become the commerce center of Vermont. If some other county does, we're gonna need more schools, right?
Well, we're already busting
You are.
things with the schools anyway,
Right,
so it's like.
and you've
hard
got,
to- Yeah.
yeah.
Can I just, my favorite part of this conversation is who are we going to hear from to help us answer these questions? Because there are other states where they've turned schools into artist colonies and then turned them back into schools,
Yeah.
as they grow or recede or, populations move around. I don't know if your wife likes the Harvard Graduate School of Education, but that's kind of a center of excellence in educational thinking in our region. I always liked the classes I took there. And we need the numbers, like we need someone committed, like redistricting, to giving us data in real time as we draw lines. And that feels a little bit overwhelming to me right now.
And if you build it, they'll come. I mean, if you make a excellent school system,
Yes,
people will come here to
That's
Vermont
right.
because they want to be part of it.
So, well, one thing we should probably do one weekend, is read some of the materials that were given to us by the superintendents.
yes.
Yeah, some of the 92.
And we have a study from a few years ago on income tax versus property tax. And all I know is that the biggest proponents of the income tax backed off after that study as well. But we should better understand, what they saw when they peered into the crystal ball.
Just one comment about property tax versus income tax. I personally don't think this committee should be addressing that. I think that the finance committee should take that on. We've got enough heavy lift to do over the next couple of months that, it's a good question. It's a time to be asking about those evaluations or the comparisons, but I don't think that we should get involved.
Maybe
Yeah,
Will
yeah, I
could
don't-
just get us emailed the report from a few years ago.
Yeah, that fair point. I mean, I didn't mean that that we should take the ball as to income tax or foundation formula property tax, but because we're so interwoven with what is happening in finance, people are going to be asking us the question, and I think we should have just at least a foundational understanding and response as well.
Maybe over, kind of periodically meet with them.
Yeah.
Find out what they're thinking. We share what we're thinking, to see if there's common ground, and then that'll at least keep us, so that we're not surprised come
Mhm.
April, May.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's gonna have to answer that question to their constituents. They don't care what committee you're on.
So one thing I offer as I think a point of clarification, but maybe I didn't get it right, is that when I listened to the superintendents, they were talking about minimums. They weren't actually saying that was ideal. Because I did ask them, I believe, the question about the upper end. You asked it first, and I followed back on the same question with the district size. And I came away after yesterday thinking that the superintendents and the agency were actually pretty close. And that the notion, the agency did say something like 10,000 for a minimum. And I thought the reasons, and again, you have to test all this. But when they talked about scale to achieve consistency of needs, to consistently meet the needs across districts, the property well is getting closer to the same thing that Senator Dinsdale just mentioned, the ability to deliver specialized services, the ability to build a bench. I thought that was compelling, actually, that they're in a situation now often where one person leaves and they're panicked because they So the more robust depth and enough, and that part about enough scale to meet the special needs of individual school communities. I kind of, believe me, subject to change. I'm kind of leaning toward districts of 10,000 as making sense. But I think we need to test it. That's all I'll say. That's what I want you to just kind of get that out. When we're all thinking about that, we'll might be leaning. So I'm just telling you that I think that, but we need to make sure we're right. In fact, I think it doesn't mean too much.
So what I'm hearing from the agency is, don't even worry about the funding part of it. You're gonna have enough money to do everything you want. I really read that between the lines. Because they're convinced that they've got the data that shows that using the foundation formula, you're gonna be able to do it. And as far as the property taxes, I've been through JFO, I've been talked to the tax commissioner about why we use property taxes, and it's because it's more stable. It's, economic downturns, income taxes vary. So I've been through all that, but I don't think that even come in the right purview. I think we should.
But not as consistent with Senator Kelly's state. The only part about this, well, not the only part, but a part that I think we do have to understand. I think tomorrow, if I understand what we're doing right with, if I understand correctly what we're doing with the House tomorrow, it's actually going to be a real time or a look at it, what this actually means on the ground, the numbers in a district. That's something we obviously do need to fully understand. So
Can you explain that just a little bit further?
I think am I right about what we're,
Yeah, it's testimony from the AOE tomorrow about, I can't explain it much better, but,
how
yeah,
it actually translates
yeah,
to the ground in
how
one district.
budgeting
Right,
decisions would be
yeah.
made at the district level and how that might look in their proposed model.
Okay, that depending on where we end up after that, what I'm saying is one thing we do need to do, I think, is like pick a district or two and actually dive down into the math of what would actually happen in that district in terms of dollars.
Yeah.
And because we hear the 13.2 is enough. We actually don't have. So we really need to fully understand how that's actually going to meet the ground.
Mm-hmm.
It's my opinion. Even though that's the work of the other committee.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to understand it fully.
So I'd just like to offer that quickly, that this is kind of a three-dimensional model, really, because I think we need to be looking at 5-10 years down the road. So Chittenden County is going to continue to grow, God forbid any kind of interruption,
Mm-hmm.
where the rest of us are going to keep declining. So what is now
Maybe
whatever.
you'll be the economic center.
Well, we need to change a couple other levers,
Yeah.
right, which we're not. Anyway, so we're maybe now a 31,000 or 32,000 student district. May 10 years from now be a 39,000
Mhm.
district, and we're slowly decreasing it unless some miracle happens. And that dynamic, that's a three-dimensional dynamic that we at least need to be aware of, that what we said now is going to be modifying over the future.
We probably ought to get a demographer in here or somebody who can really talk to us about Vermont's demographics and the trends, because I hope Senator Hashim is correct. I'm with you.
Kevin, true.
Hope you're correct. And
So we have the perfect guy. I was very impressed with Kevin Chu.
Yes.
Yeah, talking about demographics and economy. He was really sharp.
Kevin Chu, he's the Vermont Futures Project.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He's,
Yes.
They're already changing
So,
and it's going the other way.
so,
Some are.
and he
let's,
has lots of answers about how it.
Keisha, can you give me contact? info?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me,
Yeah.
be in touch, because this question is fundamental.
Mhm.
That's a good, if I can offer
Yeah.
or suggest, that's a good House, Senate, testimony.
Or maybe, and or with the finance committee. Yeah, and or, so we'll think, okay, this is what I wanted to do, is figure out, so there's one piece of testimony we definitely want to get. So,
Can I
yes,
just, whenever we crunch numbers, we will start to see winners and losers if we were to try and change this formula in 1 to 2 years. You know, there are districts that are spending more than that. There are districts that are spending less than that. I very much appreciated Bill Kimball's testimony that, you know, he doesn't believe that a district next door to him should be spending less per student than his district. Like, he sees the difference across the border in other communities that spend less. And so I just think, you know, this is the part that gets really hard, is I think we want to develop an equalization model takes a few years, so that we don't have winners and losers in the future. But I think the question is a good one, that are we trying to get to some form of equity in our per pupil spending? Because that will drive the question of how much more can a unique district raise on top of that? Because whenever we talk about those winners and losers, people say, oh, but that district could just they could just pay that locally. Well, then we've rebaked in the inequity that we have now.
Yeah. So I think I think the thing I like about the notion of the block grant, if it's high enough, is we have a much better starting point for that discussion, where all districts are equally funded.
That's true.
Not approved. So that's, and we have to then figure out how to keep it high, so it doesn't, because you know what happened 30 years ago with the foundation formula is we started to not fund it fully, and then inequities emerged, and that can't happen again. And then whatever we do in terms of districts being able to raise additional dollars, we need to make sure that it's truly the ability to do that is truly equalized across districts, which of course is required by the written test anyway.
Right.
But it's also happens to be the right thing to do.
Part of the question.
Yeah, so we can kind of.
So I understand it as with the foundation formula, we're going to say that with each student, we start out 13.2, that on a basic average learning student, that's what we'll spend on it. And then the weights come in of distance and all that, where we get that. So that final number, if we do an average one with maybe average weights, let's say it comes up to $17,000, just arbitrary numbers. So now we're telling every district, you know, basically you're getting $17,000 to $20,000 per student. Then you start adding on what you said, that, oh, our district wants to add on this and this, and we're willing to raise that money locally. Now we all of a sudden, oh, this district's getting to do that, and we can't afford to do that. Is that going to be called an inequity, that, oh, they're getting to do more than we, even though they're all meeting the basic equities of what we want?
I think, just to play this out a little bit, the foundation, the way that I think at least the administration is envisioning this, is that theoretically, the foundation amount is enough to educate the kids if it's an efficiently run district. And then I think we'll want to end up with a mechanism for districts to be able to raise more if they want to. And the point that Senator Hinsdale's making, and I agree with, and plus it's constitutionally required,
Right.
is that that ability to raise the dollars needs to be equal across districts, either because the district with less property wealth gets subsidized as they do it, so that it becomes the same pain is suffered across each district if you raise the same amount of money. And so it has to get equalized. And that's what we have now. We can do that. The math, we can figure out the math on that. But we don't want to, well, I won't say we don't want to do anything, actually. So yes.
So I'm not an attorney, but
Yeah.
I think in order for us to do, even go to the funding with the foundation fund, we have to go back and amend that 60 and 68.
Well, they're going to be
Because
long.
Right, well, that's, so it'll have to be sent,
Well,
repeal it,
it's-
right, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's what we're doing here.
right, we're not gonna do it, right? We're not, okay.
To that point, I'd really like for us to hear from like a real estate lawyer because, or somebody, when we draw a line around a district and we say, all of this physical plant is yours, you know, I have this vision that maybe we would then let them sell buildings more I mean, it really, if we can't penalize them for shedding physical plant, which we would essentially be if we said you owe the money back from a decision you made 50 years ago. So I'm trying to figure out how we hand this elected board and the superintendent a bunch of physical plant and
That's-
say like,
That's a carrot.
figure it out. I
That's
love
the
for
carrot.
that to be a carrot. I have a lot of ideas for carrots and mostly carrots. But
But the municipality could benefit financially. from it.
yeah, we need like a lawyer.
But we have to also be careful not to go down into that. Maybe that's the next level of discussion.
Mhm.
It's a level of discussion we're gonna have.
Or
We're
maybe
gonna have to get to.
institutions take
But
that view.
I'm thinking more about really focusing first on what is the size
Sure.
district that provides the best educational opportunities and outcomes for kids. And factored into that, as close as we can get to equal ability to raise dollars.
Right.
And then think, there's 100 pieces that are gonna go
Right.
under that, but we can just think about that first. Although it's really hard to think about any of this in isolation because it's all connected. to all
Right.
that. So having said that, yes.
Well, I just like to agree with Senator Ron Hinsdale that, no, it's not a priority, but it's something that we need by the end of this session, be able to answer to our constituents is what are
Yeah.
the, first, second order ramifications of property facilities? Who's going to have control of this? How is it going to unfold? Who benefits? Who could potentially lose? That we need to be able
What's
to
the
go right
deferred
back.
maintenance?
Yeah, right,
District.
all of that.
I mean, who am I? But I mean, institutions has some people who have municipal experience and who are lawyers and like maybe we just don't have enough time if maybe they start just looking at school construction and how we used to do it and how complicated we've made it if we try to just give people their buildings. Give people their problems with all the buildings too.
Yes, if I understand.
It's always gonna come back on the state though.
Well, if I understand it correctly, what you're talking about is if the school were to no longer to be used as a school, what would the district do with it?
It's a both and for me of institutions used to do school construction. And then right before I got here, you were there when they did, right before I got here, they stopped. And I don't know what happens if we start to have that conversation again. And I would imagine that if we have this as a very long-term conversation, that the institutions committees might be where that lives again.
It may well be, you're right. And by the way, I think the House has maybe putting a little focus on this beyond.
Well, Al Simmons is one of the only people left who
Oh,
remembers.
no, I'm at the House end.
Oh, really? Okay,
Thinking
but
about school construction.
Alice Simmons is like almost the only expert
Yeah,
witness we
yeah,
have
that's
left
right.
on the topic.
So do we want to, so how do we have to figure out a way to move this forward here? So I think I'm hearing, as it relates to district size, am I hearing more testimony from some experts about, no, that's what we did have some of that, yesterday with the department. We had at least reference to it when we heard from the superintendents. But perhaps someone from the Kennedy School.
The HUGSI, the Harvard Graduate School of Education.
Okay.
For, your wife might know something.
This was not her area. She's
Yeah.
an internationalist, not a US.
Wedge Council can help us.
I took a class on education inequality at HUGSI when I was at the Kennedy School. So I know they have thinkers and they get a lot of superintendents from around New England who go there. That's all.
I know I've mentioned this before, but we could reach out to them because Wyoming is pretty almost identical in size in that. They do have a good education system. And we can get somebody from there to come and speak to us.
You're fixated on why.
Well, because they've been in the top 15, you know, they've been in the top 5 for the last 15 years and they're doing something right out there. Yeah, you know, I hate keep eating that, but it's like, it's, the proof is in their scores. And it, you know, if we had that for Vermont, we'd have a lot more people looking at, hey, I want my child to come here, be in the top 5, you know, the top 5 every, as long as they have.
You might indirectly be suggesting that we think about somebody who is running and operating a district of the 10,000, and from another state. And then we'll talk about maybe the advantages, disadvantages.
Yes, at least get somebody that runs 10,000
Yeah.
and what's it?
Okay.
Yeah.
I just found my old Harvard Graduate School of Education professor, David Demme. And I'll send it to you. His research is on economics of skill development, education, and labor markets. So he might be a good person
Okay.
for us to hear from anyway.
Okay. Well, and copy book.
Mhm.
Okay.
You choose.
So picking up on that, we'll get the person in from On Futures Project and talk about, think about demographics, which way we need to be thinking about this, or maybe we'll having to think about it both ways, up and down, and where. And then try to find a couple of subject matter people to spend a little more time on this on district size. Should we switch to school size for a minute? And have the same discussion or people, because I think we're going to have, and actually tell me if you disagree, because I've been thinking that we would need to have some sense of school size in our heads, at least as we're doing this. And I think we'll be able to think about ideal size for elementary and high school, because I think that will affect how we think about districts, and lines and those kinds of things. So we may not have to get down to the kind of precision we will with districts, because we're going to have to figure that out. But so, yeah.
Yeah, I think, we kind of alluded to Senator Weeks, and I did allude to this earlier. That in my opinion, you know, I don't think anyone at the table is necessarily a subject matter expert on what is the right size for a school. But I do think that we do need to hear from various experts who, no, well, not just experts, but also, you know, the people who are doing the day-to-day work in the schools as to, you know, why a certain school size might be ideal. We might get conflicting information, and then, you know, regardless of that, you know, one researcher is saying, let's stick in the random number, 200 people, 200 students. Another researcher is saying 500. I think it'll be up to us to dig down and to figure out, okay, why are they saying 500? Why are they saying 200? Where can we find a place in the middle that makes sense for Vermont with the factors that these different subject matter experts have presented to us? That's my take on it.
First off, I agree. Second, I think that school size is going to have one of the key determinants is going to be distance. How far should a student travel? That's going to determine, like, given however many districts we have, how far we can draw from to bring students together. That's a real limiter, and that will affect school size. I think we need to answer what's the target size, and walk away and agree with that. But a lot of that, when it hits reality, it's going to be how far is too far, and that's going to determine the other kind of demographic shape in schools.
And the road conditions.
Well, it's interwoven, right? Because, you know, what happens, weather today versus weather yesterday, it's,
Yes, we'll have the ideal as if we were operating on a flat terrain starting from scratch.
Correct.
We can perhaps begin to figure out a deal, then the mountains may get in the way of something.
And I was really interested in the class size conversation, and I hear things that aren't necessarily a reality in Chittenden County that I don't have enough information to act on, like grade combining and things, you know. That's all very interesting to me, and I want to make sure that everyone understands who might be from districts that have no small schools. But, you know, I also just want to, I often in the back of my head think, what do people who can pay for it buy? And people who can pay for it buy certain class sizes and certain extracurriculars and certain opportunities. And then they also buy alternatives to all of that, where a student might thrive who needs a very small environment or a one-on-one, you know, special ed program that takes them into the woods or, you know, like I think we also just, again, want to be thinking about what's making some places successful and how do we give families some choice within a larger, I'm sorry, I said that word. We give people some agency about how to get their kids what they need. And how does that benefit from smaller class sizes or larger class sizes or special programs and special education. I also, just while we're having a big discussion, we need to start hearing from folks about pre-K and CTE. Because I don't even know what we're trying to do there and how that will affect us.
Yeah, I've been leaving that one, knowing that we
Okay.
have to get to it.
Yeah,
Knowing
yeah.
that we have to get to it. So,
no, I was just gonna say, I was surprised that CT wasn't kind of more in the forefront of yesterday's conversation.
yeah,
Now that we're getting more into the details, CT is not a focal point.
no, well, the first time they were in, they talked about CTE and so district, and we have to figure out what that means and how that would actually work.
Right.
Yeah,
I guess my big, to nod to Senator Hashim's point about like what size school are we trying to develop? When I think of the potential for CTE to be lifelong learning, how do we start with a really big sense of what we want for our state and our society, and then make the model work for that, you know, rather than say like, oh, we'll probably have X number of seniors who will drop out unless they go to CTE, you know. How do these become community hubs for lifelong learning? Because I have UVM in my backyard, which promises seniors free tuition, and it's a huge lifeline and breaks isolation for some people. And I would hope the whole state has something like that.
Council university.
Good.
State,
Yeah,
state,
that's good. Yeah.
State university system.
Any other thoughts about school size / class size, since they were kind of talking about together?
If you keep letting me talk, I'll keep coming up with points.
It is interesting. I hadn't really thought about this, but it seems to me we probably don't need to. Maybe we don't need to have as. We're obviously going to have total clarity about district sizes and lines. Maybe we don't need to have exactly the same clarity about school size. I don't know if that's where that will fall. So anyway,
So I know we're the committee of jurisdiction, but too bad we couldn't kind of ask for volunteers from senators from their district and a representative, we don't do public hearings anymore. But
Good.
well, one thing we are going to do before, as we start to think about lines on the map for districts, we are going to invite senators in because they know their districts, they know their areas. Like I've got some in the back of my mind, I'm dealing with some very specific thoughts about a few nuances where I live that I know have to be.
we have to,
So we're all thinking that, and others another senator approached me about that. So it seems to me very clear, just like happens with the redistricting, we would give every senator a chance to come in and talk to us. And then, and more than that, but, so I think we've given up, by the way, I'm not trying to say we're done because I'm happy to keep talking as long as people want to. But I think this has been helpful in helping then Senator Weeks and I work with Will to do a little agenda planning for the next couple of weeks. Yes, yeah,
I'll come back to it.
what we're there. When you come back another day,
No, in fact, remember my fault. It'll come back.
yes,
Maybe if we could each, maybe the next time we meet, have a list of assumptions that come from our district, because that's one of the things that we really need to rule out. Assumptions, and you actually had a point a little bit, I didn't write it down, but that would be one of the assumptions that we have to get an answer to.
The grade merging.
Correct. And you work on an assumption until it becomes a fact.
Yeah.
If you can't make it a fact, you do away with it. So it's not an issue.
so I do think we need to do our reading, do some homework this weekend. Because we've got a lot of materials from the superintendents. I think I'm planning to actually print them before I go home and read them, mark them up, and then maybe among other things, we'll get the secretary back in here once more to really focus in on the basis of what the factual underpinnings of the research underpinnings were. They say the research shows, and I believe them actually, that they're translating for us, but let's have them in and then find those outside people that we're thinking about. So you're ready.
Yeah, I wanted to dovetail into what Senator Williams said about public testimony. So I think the AOE did a great job in advance with their listening to her to collect data. Now, the majority of the plan is out on the table. I'm wondering if they or somewhere inside the State House, we should be following up with, okay, here's, you've heard the plan. It's been pretty well articulated in the papers. There's testimony, Now what's the reaction? Public reaction, not legislative reaction.
Yeah.
If,
At one point, yeah, I'm thinking there's still more clarity to come up about the.
right. No, I'm just saying, I don't know when it's right.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in that process.
Right.
If you cut out the public, then we're all gonna suffer.
And to have that answer by town meeting day,
No, it's
like when they can
Right.
engage, cause I am worried for everyone at town meeting week. What they are going to say, and they at least need to be able to point to, thank you for that feedback, and we're gonna be having a public hearing on this in March. That would be my piece, because I don't know how people already have reached out to share their frustrations with those listening tour sessions. So maybe some people felt really well heard, and I don't think they came up with something that misses the mark. But we will have seething frustration from people who feel like they just didn't get to say their piece at those meetings. They were kind of shuttled into little small groups and stuff, and we can't let that bubble over without hearing it.
So I think we definitely need to have some number of public hearings, so we'll figure out what that is and how we do it.
By the admission of AOE, they said that the listen and learn tour was pretty short and spent a lot of time, but they did offer feedback before as a part of the process where everybody they had a butcher sheet. They stuck it on the wall so people, when they went out of the room after the meeting, they could look at what everybody said, because they actually broke out. And they said that we got a lot of information, but we really didn't spend enough time in any one district to get all the answers. So
We're still going to figure out how to do it efficiently, so, but we have to, we'll talk and figure it out. Okay. So we've got some, you've given us some things, some material to work with. To figure out the steps for the next week or two. So are people feeling like that? I've been thinking this is our first task, is pull this together as best we can and actually begin to work here and drill down and does that make sense to people? Okay. I think we're done.